This is Sid Roth saying, I have a vision. Now is the set time to blow the trumpet in Zion.
Blow a trumpet in Zion, sound it on the mountain. Blow a trumpet in Zion, for the day of the Lord is come.
Shalom, Mishpacha. Shalom, family. Mishpacha is a Hebrew word. It means family. And we're the Mishpacha, the family with a Jewish heart, made up of Jewish and non-Jewish people that are one new man in Messiah. Getting ready, Mishpacha, to blow the grandest shofar. Oh, the grandest trumpet in Zion. We want everyone, everywhere to hear the good news. We want everyone, everywhere to be red hot for the Messiah. And there are innuendos in college and in high school, calculated plans to talk people out of their faith, and it's called the theory of evolution. And every Bible believer knows that it's not true, because as a Bible believer, we believe in creationism. But isn't it good to get scientific answers to these objections rather than saying, well, I just believe it? I mean, haven't you wrestled with people saying how old the earth is and how old the Bible says it is and how there's a conflict right there, and people have come up with various theories? Well, in yesterday's broadcast, I was interviewing Dr. Baugh, who is founder and director of Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, and he just blew those arguments out of the water. But, Carl, today I have to ask you this question. There's so much talk about cloning and DNA, and we're getting so close to creating human life. What would your response be?
All right. Now, that's a very interesting topic. You probably don't know, perhaps you do, and we'll talk about it later, that I'm the scientific research director of the world's first hyperbaric biosphere dealing with living systems in a context like we had originally from the Jewish, Hebrew Jewish, Christian, Judeo context, Genesis and Exodus. We're actually simulating those conditions and examining living systems and what would occur there. There is a lot of popular talk about creating life in a test tube, but when you get to the individuals involved in the projects, they admit readily they're not creating life at all. What they're taking is existing life form and using what's termed genetic recombinance, often recombining portions, strands of DNA from one living system with the strands of DNA from another system. And since it's already living to begin with, it is sometime temporarily a viable entity, lives for a period of time, bizarre life forms, but they're not creating life. The law of biogenesis states very clearly that only life begets life. Now, we can toy with life. We think we can improve life, but we really can't. Every living system has a genetic potential within a certain realm, and while that genetic potential can be shuffled on the surface, and we call that microevolution. No problem with microevolution. That's variation within genetic boundary. But it's macroevolution where the theory is that somehow mutational change, environmental adaptation, natural selection can give you an increased amount of information to lead to another life form. That really isn't true. You can only get living systems out of living systems. So the cloning, which is really a duplicate copy, again begins with a living system. But then they will introduce new genes into a living system and call it a new life form. Well, it's really a combination of two life forms, and normally it has a very limited viability.
Let me change the subject just for a second. There are people that say they are Bible believers, and they're scientists, and they say there's certain aspects of the theory of evolution that are scientific, and they're not going to throw out the baby with the dirty bathwater. They're going to keep it. Are there aspects of the theory of evolution that are scientific?
There are aspects. If we're talking about microevolution, that is change within genetic information. That's microevolution. But it's the theory that over periods of time, mutational change or various small catastrophes altered the genes so that you get another life form that is a higher organism. That is totally unscientific. And many good Bible-believing professional Christians have been led to believe that the earth is old, so that there have been changes of one species or one kind. In the Hebrew, you would call that, or we would call that, the baraman, the kinds, one kind leading to another. But that has never been demonstrated in the laboratory. Plus, in the book, I talk about life origins and the fact that those life origins have never been demonstrated to have occurred naturally. In fact, can't. Like on page 16, I quote Professor Leslie Orgel stating, "It is extremely improbable that proteins and nucleic acids, both of which are structurally complex, arose spontaneously in the same place at the same time. Yet it also seems impossible to have one without the other," he states. And so at first glance, he admits, one might have to conclude that life could never in fact have originated by chemical means. And he's right. And good Bible-believing Christians often do not know the facts. You see, one field trusts another, like the geologist at the university. You go to the geologist and you say, show me evolution. He said, well, I can't show it to you. Go to the biologist. We trust him. He has the information. You go to the biologist and say, I need information proving evolution. He says, well, I can't give it to you. Go to the paleontologist. He'll give it to you. You go to the paleontologist and he says, well, we interpret the fossils, but we really can't prove evolution. You're going to have to go to the geologist. So it's a circuitous route.
It's called passing the buck.
Passing the buck is exactly right.
Dr. Baugh, but what about, I mean, these are questions that I have pondered. I believe the Bible, but I've pondered these things. What about from time to time you open up the newspaper and you hear about the missing links? Is there any truth to these things? I mean, there are real scientists that are involved in studying these missing links. The apes that go back to humans.
I have an entire chapter dealing with progression of life forms in the book, dealing with that very subject. Anthropologists, physical anthropologists or paleoanthropologists, those who deal with the distant ancient past history of mankind, as they term it, like to bring up the various missing links, but amazingly, every single specimen disproves the original theory, so that we finally come to the conclusion, and in the book I verify this by leading professors, we finally come to the conclusion that on one hand we have apes, sometimes bizarre lower primates. On the other hand, we have Homo sapien, man, or Homo habilis, or Homo erectus. We have those interpreted in one form or another, but when the final data come in, you have only two camps. Sometimes you will have a human skull that's slightly bizarre because of various conditions and inbreeding, which can produce Neanderthal types in a matter of just 3 generations. Did you know that, Sid?
No.
Breed very close.
Never.
You can get Neanderthal types, we have that documented in the literature, in just 3 generations. So where you isolate a culture of people and have inbreeding or limited genetic viability, then you get bizarre characteristics. And sometime you'll find in a fossil or a grave burial site various individuals that look a little bizarre, but they're not apes. Now let's get to the technical data to prove that an ape could never become a man. One of the scholars that I quote in the book, Dr. Barney Maddox, a geneticist, shows that The difference between the lower primates, or chimpanzees, or apes, we would say in general, the genetic difference between an ape and a man is only 1.6%. Now, at first, that appears to be very alarming. Here you have an ape, 98.4% genetically identical or similar to a human being. So wouldn't it be very easy to bridge that gap? Not at all. First of all, that 98.4% of genetic information has to do with the fact that he has a spinal column, has appendages. We have a spinal column. We have appendages. He has a skull. He has a brain case. He has a brain. He has eyes and nose and mouth. He has hair. He has legs. Actually, an ape really has 4 arms in a very specific sense. But all of those are 4 appendages, and all of that requires genetic information. So that is 98.4% identical to us, because we have arms, we have legs, we have hands, we have feet. An ape has 4 hands, actually. But we call those, again, 4 appendages. We have a skull, we have a brain case, we have a cerebrum. All of these things together comprise genetic information. But it's the 1.6% difference that is extremely important. At first glance, it would appear that bridging that 1.6% gap would be easy, but it is absolutely impossible. I mentioned Dr. Barney Maddox, a specialist in genetics, and he showed that 1.6% difference represents 48 million nucleotide differences. Any accumulation of 3 of these in succession or adjacent to each other totally destroys the host organism. So, Sid, what we find in actual scientific research is it is impossible to bridge the gap from ape to man. Each is species-specific and genetic-specific. In fact, I quote in the book on page 76 an admission by Scientific American that the study of human origins, that's what we're talking about, fossil man, seems to be a field in which every discovery raises the bait to a more sophisticated level of uncertainty. And in the book on page 77, I think we may want to discuss those as a later date. We talk about each of these: Piltdown man, Nebraska man, which turned out to be an extinct pig, Australopithecus.
But why? How come we don't hear? We hear they found this missing link and all the publicity, but we never find out that it turned out to be a pig.
Because of the liberal position to secularism. We have a generation that has a liberal press and academia which turns deliberately from any reference to design and creation and assumes evolution to be the case.
Mishpucha, your faith will just skyrocket when you read this book. Give it to high school students, to college students, even for yourself, for your intellectual husband that says, oh, I can't believe in the Bible because of evolution. This is the book. It's a hardback. It's a wonderful gift. It's called Why Do Men Believe Evolution Against All Odds? We're asking $20, postage paid. The illustrations are the best I've ever seen to make a complex subject simple.
If you would like to receive a complimentary copy of our bi-monthly teaching newsletter, cassette catalog, or information about becoming Mishpocha, write to me, Sid Roth, Post Office Box 1918, Brunswick, Georgia 31521. Or call our order-only line, 1-800-548-1918. To place a credit card order, call anytime, 1-800-548-1918. For all other calls, the number is 912-265-2500. That's 912-265-2500. For a cassette tape of this week's broadcast, send $5 to Sid Roth, Post Office Box 1918, Brunswick, Georgia 31521. Look us up on the web, www.sidroth.org. That's www.sidroth.org.